Respecting differing opinions. One of the most valuable qualities we can possess is the ability to be secure enough in our own beliefs that we don't feel the need to constantly prove others wrong. True strength and impact come not from dominating the conversation or insisting that our point of view is the only valid one. Rather, they arise when we are secure in our beliefs and comfortable enough to let others express their differing opinions without feeling threatened. People who make the most meaningful impact are often those who can sit in a room full of differing opinions, genuinely listen to others, and respond with respect. It's not about winning an argument or converting someone to your side. Instead, it's about engaging with empathy, acknowledging that everyone's perspective is shaped by their unique experiences, and giving room for those viewpoints to exist without judgment. When we are truly secure in ourselves, we don't need others to validate our beliefs. Our confidence doesn't stem from asserting that we're right, but from understanding that there's no need to convince others to think the way we do. The people who are confident in their own beliefs can coexist with differing opinions and still maintain an open heart and mind. The ultimate strength comes from being so secure in our own beliefs that we don't need others to validate them. True confidence allows us to genuinely respect and listen to differing opinions without feeling the need to argue or persuade. The dangers of gossip. Gossip is one of the most subtle yet damaging habits that can creep into relationships. It can feel harmless, even as a form of bonding with others. We often justify it by saying, "I'm just venting," or "it's no big deal." But deep down, we know that gossip carries weight. It can erode trust, create division, and ultimately harm relationships in ways we might not see at first. I used to believe that gossip was just a way to bond with friends. If someone had an issue with another person, it felt natural to talk about it with others. It seemed innocent enough, just a way to blow off steam or share something that everyone knew. But over time, I realized that even small remarks behind someone's back could cause serious harm. I started to see that I wasn't just sharing facts. I was contributing to a toxic environment that made others feel uncomfortable and unsafe. Why we gossip and why it's damaging. At its core, gossip often stems from insecurity. When we talk about someone else's flaws, mistakes, or personal details, it gives us a temporary boost in self-worth. It can feel like a way to elevate ourselves by lowering others. However, that boost is short-lived, and the consequences of gossip are far-reaching. When we gossip, we send a message to others. If unwilling to talk about them behind their back, I'll likely do the same to you. People pick up on this. They may not say it out loud, but they know that a gossiping friend or colleague cannot be trusted. This damages relationships, often without us even realizing it. Over time, people become more guarded, share less with you, and the bond you once had slowly dissolves. A personal example of the harm of gossip. I learned the hard way how damaging gossip can be to relationships. There was a time when I would talk about minor issues with a close friend to others, thinking it was harmless venting. One day, that friend found out what I had been saying. The hurt was evident in their eyes. They felt betrayed. Every conversation we'd had seemed public now, and it took months to rebuild that trust. I realized then that each time I gossiped, I was chipping away at the foundation of our friendship. It was like dismantling a bridge piece by piece until nothing was left but hurt and suspicion. The impact of gossip in professional settings. In the workplace, gossip is especially destructive. When gossip spreads, the entire environment becomes toxic. Employees no longer feel safe, and the team loses its sense of unity. People begin to watch their words carefully, wondering who is talking about whom. This leads to lower morale, decreased productivity, and a lack of trust. The gossipers may get temporary satisfaction from the drama, but they are left isolated and mistrusted. How I stopped gossiping and changed my relationships. I knew I needed to stop gossiping if I wanted real, trusting relationships. It wasn't easy at first. Old habits die hard. But each time I felt the temptation to gossip, I reminded myself of the damage it caused. Instead of indulging in gossip, I began to redirect conversations. When a friend started gossiping, I'd steer the conversation towards something positive or personal, something that could build connection instead of tearing someone down. Over time, I noticed a shift. My relationships grew stronger. People started trusting me more, knowing they could confide in me without fear that their words would be shared with others. Without gossip, conversations became deeper and more meaningful. I learned more about the people around me, their dreams, struggles, and hopes, without focusing on their flaws. The power of respecting others' absence. One of the most important lessons I've learned is that true integrity is shown in how we treat others when they're not around. It's easy to be kind and respectful when someone is standing in front of us. The true test is how we speak about them when they aren't there to hear it. Choosing not to gossip about someone, even when they aren't present, shows respect for their reputation and privacy. It demonstrates that we honor them for who they are, not just for how we can benefit from their presence. Gossip may feel like a way to bond or vent, but it ultimately erodes trust and harms relationships. By choosing not to gossip, we build stronger, more meaningful connections that are based on mutual respect and integrity. Elevating conversations and focusing on the positive can transform relationships and help create an environment where people feel safe and valued. The dangers of conditional friendships. We've all experienced moments when life gets busy and the people we care about seem to fade into the background. We forget to check in, to ask how they're doing, or to take the time to nurture our connections. However, one of the most damaging patterns in relationships occurs when we only reach out to others when we need something, whether it's a favor, advice, or someone to vent to. The habit of connecting only when we're in need creates an imbalanced and transactional dynamic in relationships. I learned the hard way how much this pattern can hurt when a close friend gently called me out on it. I hadn't spoken to them in weeks, maybe even months, and the few times we did talk, it was only because I needed something, whether it was advice or just someone to lean on during a rough patch. They weren't angry, but there was a quiet hurt in their voice when they said, "Sometimes it feels like you only talk to me when you need help." That hit me harder than I expected. The issue with transactional relationships. When you only reach out to someone when you need something from them, you create a transactional relationship. It becomes less about genuine connection and more about what the other person can offer you. Over time, people start to notice this pattern. Even if they don't confront you about it, they start feeling like they're just a resource or a backup plan for when you need assistance. The people in your life deserve more than that. They aren't there simply to fulfill your needs. They are main characters in their own stories. They have their own struggles, joys, and challenges, and when you only show up in their life when you need something, it can feel like you're indifferent to them as a person. Instead of being seen as a friend or companion, you become someone who is just there for what they can provide. The emotional cost of conditional friendships. Relationships built on the expectation that someone will always be there when you need them can feel draining and one-sided. You may not even realize that you're falling into this trap, but over time, these relationships can start to feel empty and hollow. You're taking, but not giving back. And eventually, people will start to distance themselves, sensing the imbalance. It's not just that they feel used, it's that they feel unappreciated for who they are. They may begin to wonder, does this person care about me, or do they only want something from me? And when those questions start creeping in, trust begins to erode, and the friendship becomes strained. Shifting the focus from, what can I get, to how can I give? I realized that to stop falling into this pattern, I had to shift my mindset. Instead of thinking, what can I get from this relationship? I had to ask, how can I give? Changing this perspective required intentional effort. Rather than reaching out to friends or family only when I needed something, I began to check in just to see how they were doing. No agenda, no ulterior motives. At first, it felt awkward and forced, especially since I was so used to only reaching out when I had a specific need. But as I made it a point to connect without expecting anything in return, I noticed a real difference in my relationships. People started to open up more. They didn't feel like they were just there to meet my needs. They felt valued for who they were. How reaching out without an agenda can strengthen connections. One of the most eye-opening experiences was when I reached out to a family member with no agenda. I typically called them only when I needed advice, but this time, I simply wanted to know how they were doing. There was no hidden reason, no question I needed answered, just a conversation to reconnect. At first, they seemed surprised. It was clear they were waiting for me to get to the real reason behind the call, but as we continued to talk, the conversation flowed naturally. We laughed, caught up, and I realized how much I had been missing out on by only reaching out when it was convenient for me. There was no sense of obligation or duty on their part, just a genuine exchange that made the relationship feel stronger and more fulfilling. Building the habit of genuine connection. It's not enough to reach out occasionally. If you want to break the pattern of conditional relationships, you need to make genuine connection a habit. Set reminders for yourself to check in with people regularly, even when you don't need anything from them. Whether it's a text to ask how someone is doing or a phone call to catch up, these small acts of care show others that you value them for who they are, not just for what they can do for you. In our fast-paced world, it's easy to forget the importance of this. Relationships require ongoing effort and attention. If we want our connections to thrive, we have to make time for them. Taking the time to nurture your relationships, to check in with friends, family, or colleagues just to see how they're doing, can make all the difference in building trust and deepening bonds. The real value of relationships built on trust and giving. The more I practiced reaching out without an agenda, the more I noticed how much more fulfilling my relationships became. There was no longer a sense of transactional interaction. It was about connecting, sharing, and simply being there for each other. These types of connections are the ones that bring real joy and fulfillment. They are the relationships you look back on with gratitude, not regret. By focusing on genuine connections and showing up for others, not just when you need something, you can create relationships that are built on mutual respect, trust, and love. These are the relationships that provide real support during tough times and joy during the good times. And they're the ones that last a lifetime. Relationships thrive when they are built on mutual giving and connection, not just on one person's needs. By reaching out without an agenda, showing genuine care, and making relationships a priority, you can transform your connections into meaningful, long-lasting friendships that are based on trust and mutual respect. The dangers of gossip in relationships. Gossip is often seen as a harmless way to bond with others or to vent about the frustrations we're feeling. It's a guilty pleasure that many people indulge in without fully understanding the impact it can have on relationships. What starts out as casual conversation, just sharing a funny or surprising story about someone, can quickly evolve into a pattern of negativity that harms both the people being discussed and the ones doing the talking. I vividly remember a time when I believed gossiping about someone was a way to bond with others. It felt like a form of camaraderie, like I was just sharing facts or blowing off steam. But over time, I realized that even small, seemingly harmless comments could chip away at trust and destroy connections. Here's how it all started for me. I would meet up with friends, and the conversation would inevitably turn toward mutual acquaintances. Did you hear about what happened with her job? Or, can you believe what he said? It all seemed harmless at first, just casual conversation. But the more I got involved, the more I found myself exaggerating details, adding my own opinions for drama, or simply nodding along to stories that painted others in a bad light. After these conversations, I often felt a mix of excitement and guilt. While it was momentarily satisfying to be in the know or to share something juicy, I realized that if the tables were turned, I wouldn't want others talking about me like that. Why do we gossip? Gossiping often stems from a deeper sense of insecurity. When we talk about others behind their backs, it can make us feel better about ourselves. Like highlighting someone else's flaws or mistakes somehow makes us seem less flawed. It's a temporary boost to our self-esteem. But this high doesn't last. The consequences of gossip, however, can be long-lasting. When we gossip, we communicate an underlying message. If I'm willing to talk about others behind their backs, I'll likely do the same to you. People sense this, even if they don't directly say it. The truth is, when you gossip, you lose the trust of those around you. If someone hears you talking about a mutual friend, they may wonder what you're saying about them when they aren't around. Over time, trust starts to break down, and relationships become more superficial rather than deeply connected. The damage gossip does to trust and relationships. One of my closest friendships almost fell apart because of gossip. I had been venting about minor issues I was having with my friend to others, thinking it was just a harmless way of venting when I was frustrated. But one day, they found out what I had been saying. The hurt in their voice was undeniable. They felt betrayed, like every private conversation we had shared had been made public. It took months to rebuild that trust, and I realized that every time I had gossiped, I had been slowly dismantling the foundation of our friendship. It was like taking apart a bridge, piece by piece, until nothing was left but suspicion and pain. The ripple effect of gossip. But the damage doesn't stop at the person being gossiped about. It affects everyone involved. Gossip creates an environment of negativity, where judgment becomes the focus instead of understanding and connection. Instead of bonding over shared experiences or positive moments, gossip turns conversations into critiques of others. It can start to feel like negativity is the only thing that bonds people together. Gossip also introduces an element of fear. People become more guarded in their conversations because they fear that what they say might end up being the next topic of gossip. This erodes trust and creates an atmosphere where people are less open, less vulnerable, and less willing to form deep connections. In a professional setting, gossip is even more destructive. A workplace full of gossip quickly becomes a toxic environment. Employees stop feeling safe, teamwork diminishes, and morale takes a nosedive. People start to worry about who's talking about whom, and the whole atmosphere becomes charged with suspicion and negativity. While the gossipers may feel a temporary sense of power, they are often left isolated and distrusted. What happened when I stopped gossiping? After realizing how much damage gossip had caused in my relationships, I knew I needed to make a change. It wasn't easy at first. Old habits die hard, and I often found myself tempted to gossip or vent. But every time I felt that urge, I reminded myself of the hurt I had caused and the trust I had broken. It helped me resist. Rather than gossiping, I began redirecting conversations. If someone started talking about another person, I would steer the discussion towards something more positive or personal, something that would help build a connection rather than tear someone else down. Slowly, I noticed a shift. My relationships grew stronger. People started opening up more to me, trusting me with their thoughts and feelings because they knew I wouldn't share those things with others. I realized that conversations without gossip were not only more enjoyable but more meaningful. Respecting others' absence, a sign of true integrity. One of the most profound lessons I've learned is that true integrity comes from respecting others when they're not around. It's easy to be kind and respectful to someone in front of them, but the true test of character is how we talk about them when they aren't there to hear it. When we choose to speak positively about others and protect their privacy, even when they're not around, it shows that our respect for them is not conditional. By resisting the urge to gossip, we create an environment where people feel safe and valued. When others see that we don't engage in gossip, they know they can trust us completely. This trust is rare and a gift that strengthens all of our relationships. Elevating the conversation. The next time you find yourself tempted to gossip, ask yourself, is this bringing me closer to the people around me, or is it creating distance? Gossip may give a fleeting sense of connection, but it's a fragile bond built on negativity. Instead, try elevating the conversation. Focus on what's positive, what brings people together, rather than what divides them. Be the person who inspires others to rise above petty talk, who shows that conversations can be both uplifting and real. You'll find that conversations without gossip allow for deeper, more authentic connections that are based on mutual respect and trust. Gossip may seem like a way to bond or vent, but it ultimately erodes trust and damages relationships. By choosing not to engage in gossip, we build deeper, more meaningful connections based on respect, trust, and integrity. Focus on elevating conversations by discussing what brings people together, rather than what pulls them apart. The impact of only reaching out when you need something. It's something many of us have done, perhaps without even realizing it. Reaching out to people only when we need something. Maybe it's advice, a favor, or simply someone to vent to during a stressful moment. Life gets busy, and sometimes we fall into the trap of only making contact when we have an agenda or a specific need to fulfill. It's easy to justify, but this behavior can be damaging to our relationships over time. I learned this lesson the hard way when a close friend gently called me out on it. I hadn't spoken to them in weeks, maybe even months. And the few times we had talked, it had always started with me needing something, whether it was help with a problem or seeking advice. They weren't angry, but I could hear the quiet hurt in their voice when they said, "Sometimes it feels like you only talk to me when you need something." That statement stung, and it made me realize something important. I had been unknowingly neglecting my friendships. I had fallen into a pattern of reaching out only when it was convenient for me. I was asking for help or support, but wasn't showing up for others in the same way. This realization made me reflect on how I was approaching my relationships. The dangers of transactional relationships. When we only reach out to people when we need something, we create what I call a transactional relationship. It's a relationship that feels more like a business exchange than a genuine connection. People begin to feel used, undervalued, and ultimately distant. Even if they don't say anything, they can sense that the relationship isn't balanced. No one wants to feel like they are only valued for what they can provide or offer. Over time, they may start pulling away. And when you need them again, you may find that they are less responsive or engaged. This is how we can unintentionally begin to push people away. Imagine how it would feel if someone only reached out to you when they wanted something, whether it was advice, help moving, or a place to stay. At first, you might brush it off, but eventually, you'd start to feel like you were just a convenient solution to their problems. You would wonder, do they appreciate me for who I am? Or am I just useful to them when they need something? That's exactly how people feel when we only reach out when we need something. And without realizing it, we can lose the depth and warmth in our connections. Reassessing our priorities in relationships. When we only show up when we need something, it often stems from an unconscious habit of prioritizing our own needs over the relationship itself. In our busy lives, it's easy to get caught up in what we need to get done and forget about the emotional work required to maintain a friendship or relationship. But the key thing to remember is that relationships are not just about what someone can do for us. They're about being present for others, supporting them in their times of need, and showing genuine interest in their lives, not just when it's convenient for us. When we reach out only for our own needs, we send the message that the other person is secondary to our own agenda. But true relationships are built on mutual support, understanding, and genuine care. It's a two-way street where both parties give and take, not just one. Making the shift. Moving from "what can I get" to "what can I give?" Shifting from a habit of only reaching out when we need something to a more balanced, give and take relationship requires a change in perspective. Instead of thinking about what you can get, start thinking about how you can give. When we approach relationships with a mindset of giving, it shifts the dynamic from a transactional one to a truly connected one. To start, reach out without any agenda. Call a friend just to see how they're doing. Text a family member to check in. Don't wait for a reason to reach out. Just ask how they are. Try to be genuinely present in their lives. You'll start to notice that people will feel more appreciated and valued, not just for what they can give you, but for who they are. I remember trying this approach with a family member I hadn't spoken to in a while. Typically, I would only reach out when I needed advice or had a question. But this time, I simply called to catch up. We chatted for a while, and there were no expectations, no requests, just a meaningful conversation. It felt good. It felt real. And I realized how much I had been missing by only reaching out when I needed something. Building the habit of genuine connection. It's not enough to make one call or send one text and think everything is fine. To break the pattern of only reaching out when you need something, you need to make building genuine connections a habit. Consider setting a regular reminder to reach out to someone in your life, just to ask how they're doing, or to catch up on their life. Maybe it's once a week or even once a month, but the goal is to check in without any hidden agenda. When you regularly show up for others, just because, you'll begin to build deeper, more authentic relationships. Relationships, like gardens, need constant care and nurturing. If we're always too busy or distracted, we risk neglecting the connections that really matter. But if we make the time to invest in those relationships, without expecting anything in return, we'll see the benefits in the form of stronger, more fulfilling bonds. The ripple effect of genuine connection. By shifting the focus from "what can I get" to "what can I give," we begin to build relationships that are richer and more meaningful. People notice when we genuinely care. Over time, this habit becomes second nature. We no longer view others as sources to fulfill our needs, but as individuals whose experiences and feelings matter. We give without expecting anything in return, and this changes the entire dynamic of our relationships for the better. This shift in perspective not only strengthens your relationships, but also brings greater joy and fulfillment into your own life. Genuine relationships, built on mutual respect, support, and care, are the ones that stand the test of time. Relationships are built on mutual respect, trust, and care. If you want deeper, more fulfilling connections, make an effort to reach out to others without expecting anything in return. Show genuine interest in their lives and offer support without an agenda. This will build stronger, more authentic relationships that are not based on transactions, but on true connection. The dangers of overlooking small acts of kindness. It's easy to think that big gestures are the only way to show someone you care. We tend to remember grand acts of kindness, those big, memorable moments that stand out in our lives. But what often goes unnoticed are the small, everyday acts of kindness. The ones that might seem insignificant at the time, but that, when accumulated, have the power to build or break a relationship. I used to believe that if I didn't do something big for someone, it didn't count as showing them I cared. Birthdays, holidays, and special events were the times I really focused on doing something meaningful for the people I loved. But over time, I began to realize that what truly mattered wasn't just the big moments. It was the small, consistent acts of kindness that built trust and connection. The subtle impact of small acts of kindness. Small acts of kindness are the invisible threads that weave the fabric of a relationship. They don't always look like grand gestures. In fact, they can often be as simple as a thoughtful text, an unexpected compliment, or even just a listening ear when someone is having a tough day. I recall a time when a friend of mine had a rough week. I didn't know exactly what they were going through, but I knew they had been stressed out with work and personal issues. One evening, I sent them a message just saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about you. I know things have been tough lately. If you need to talk or just want some company, I'm here." At first, I thought it was a small gesture, just a quick message, but the impact it had on them was profound. They told me later that it had been exactly what they needed to hear at that moment. They had been feeling isolated and unsure if anyone noticed or cared. That simple message, which I thought might not mean much, reassured them and let them know they weren't alone. This experience made me realize how small acts of kindness can have a significant impact. It's easy to overlook them, especially in a fast-paced world where we're all busy and preoccupied with our own lives. But these little gestures are often the things that hold relationships together, especially in times when people are struggling. The power of consistency in kindness. It's the consistency of these small acts that builds a foundation of trust and connection. A single kind gesture here, and there is nice, But when those small acts become a part of your regular interactions, they start to accumulate and create a bond that's stronger than just one big moment of kindness. Think about a time when someone made a small gesture for you. Maybe they held the door open, sent you a message of encouragement, or simply checked in to see how your day went. At first, these acts might seem small or even insignificant, but they add up. Over time, those little moments show that the person cares, that they're thinking of you even when you're not asking for anything. That's what builds lasting relationships. On the flip side, when we overlook the importance of small acts, relationships can start to feel one-sided. If you're always the one reaching out in big ways, maybe buying extravagant gifts or planning elaborate events, but never taking the time for the small daily interactions, people may start to feel that they're being taken for granted. Relationships that lack consistency and kindness can begin to feel superficial, no matter how grand the occasional gesture. The habit of being thoughtful. Being thoughtful doesn't require grandiose gestures. It's about making time for others in meaningful ways. When you start to make small acts of kindness a regular habit, you create an atmosphere of care and consideration. Whether it's sending a thoughtful message, showing up to support someone during a difficult time, or simply offering your time to listen, these acts don't have to be expensive or time-consuming to be meaningful. I started to make a conscious effort to incorporate small acts of kindness into my daily life. Instead of waiting for the big occasions to show I cared, I started looking for opportunities in the everyday moments. Whether it was offering a ride when a friend needed it, complimenting someone's new look, or remembering to ask about something important in their life, I began to realize how these seemingly small things added up. One of my favorite ways to do this is through the simple act of checking in on someone. It doesn't have to be long or elaborate. Just a text saying, "Hey, I was thinking about you today. How's everything going?" can brighten someone's day. That tiny effort can go a long way in building trust and deepening the connection you share with others. When kindness goes unnoticed. Of course, sometimes the small acts of kindness go unnoticed, and that can feel discouraging. There may be times when you reach out to someone, do something kind, and it feels like it wasn't appreciated or acknowledged. But here's the thing. Acts of kindness are not about getting something in return. They're about creating a culture of care and showing the people around you that they matter, even if it doesn't always result in an immediate reaction. There were times when I would offer my support to someone, and they wouldn't acknowledge it, or I would send a message and get no response. But I learned that kindness doesn't always need recognition to be meaningful. It's the act itself, the decision to be thoughtful, to show up for someone, that counts. Over time, those small moments will be remembered and appreciated, even if it's not immediately obvious. The ripple effect of small acts. What's truly powerful about small acts of kindness is their ripple effect. When we show kindness to others, it inspires them to do the same. Think of how many times you've seen someone else do something kind, and it inspired you to do something similar. It's contagious. The more we act with kindness, the more we contribute to a positive atmosphere in our relationships, workplaces, and communities. Small acts of kindness are also a reflection of our values. They show that we care about others, that we're willing to make the time and effort to nurture the relationships we have. They create an environment where people feel safe, loved, and valued. Key takeaway: never underestimate the power of small acts of kindness. While grand gestures are wonderful, it's the small, consistent acts that truly strengthen relationships. They build trust, foster connection, and create an atmosphere where care and consideration are valued. Incorporating these into your daily routine can help you develop deeper, more meaningful connections with the people around you. Building lasting relationships through thoughtful actions. As we move through life, we come to realize that relationships, whether with family, friends, colleagues, or even strangers, are the bedrock of our well-being and happiness. Yet too often, we focus on what we can get from others rather than on how we can give and invest in those connections. The truth is, it's not the big moments, the grand gestures, or the rare occasions that define a relationship. It's the day-to-day actions, the small acts of kindness, the consistent effort, and the quality of our communication that truly shape the depth and strength of our bonds with others. From the very beginning, we explored how insecurity and the need for validation often lead to toxic behaviors, such as gossiping and only reaching out when we need something. These patterns can slowly erode trust and damage relationships. The key to shifting away from these harmful habits lies in cultivating self-awareness and a genuine desire to nurture others without hidden motives or expectations. It's about learning to engage with people in a way that is rooted in respect, empathy, and kindness. A crucial point we discovered is the power of active listening and the ability to hold space for others' opinions, even when they differ from our own. People who truly have a positive impact in our lives are those who respect our differences and listen without judgment. They don't engage in gossip or use others for their own benefit. Instead, they elevate the conversation and connect on a deeper, more meaningful level. Gossip, while often seemingly harmless, can cause lasting damage to both our relationships and our reputation. When we choose to gossip, we create a toxic environment that breeds negativity, judgment, and distrust. However, when we stop gossiping and start shifting the narrative to one of respect and positivity, we invite more meaningful connections into our lives. Another powerful reflection comes from the realization that relationships should not be transactional. When we only reach out when we need something, we devalue the connection and turn it into an exchange of favors rather than a mutual bond of trust and support. Cultivating true friendships requires showing up for others with no agenda, simply to offer support, love, or even just a listening ear. Ultimately, the most important realization is that relationships thrive on consistency, care, and kindness, especially in the small, everyday moments. The little things, whether it's a kind word, a thoughtful message, or simply checking in, accumulate over time and create deep connections that last. The biggest impact we can have on those around us comes not from grand, expensive gestures, but from the quiet, everyday acts of support and generosity. As you reflect on your own relationships, take the time to ask yourself, are you building bonds that are rooted in respect, kindness, and mutual care? Are you showing up for others not just when you need something, but because you genuinely value their presence in your life? Remember, the most lasting relationships are the ones built on trust, consistency, and kindness. By breaking free from old habits such as gossiping and transactional connections, and embracing small acts of kindness and active listening, we can foster a world where true relationships flourish. These connections are the ones that will fill our lives with purpose, meaning, and joy, not just in the big moments, but in the quiet, everyday exchanges that bind us together. It's never too late to change the way we approach our relationships. By focusing on giving, listening, and showing up for others in meaningful ways, we create a ripple effect that not only transforms our own lives, but also the lives of those we care about. So let's commit to fostering genuine connections that last, not just for today, but for the years to come. If you found this video helpful and inspiring, don't forget to like it and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep creating content that empowers and inspires. Also, feel free to share your thoughts or experiences in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.